You ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? Why, what is going on here? Why did I make these bad decisions? Like you're up to waist deep in like marsh grass and you're climbing over trees and you're like,
good morning or evening or whatever time of day it is where you're at. I am really excited to present this little Brews in beta. This is the second Brews in beta, talking with the FKT holders for the Cottonwood Marble Loop. I thought this was a really enjoyable time with some fun stories and some great beta. I really hope you enjoy it.
We decided to get together as FKT holders and former FKT holders on the Cottonwood Marble Loop to chit-chat about our experiences, some beta, the good and the bad, and just tell some stories and hope it helps out in your decision to try this route. To jump into it, I first want to intro Josh Grant, who wasn't able to be here today, but he's the one that put this route up and kind of inspired all of us to come out. He's kind of on a mission to find these epic routes inside of different national parks all throughout California. And so far he's put up some super classic ones that have almost instantly been repeated, which is usually a great sign that it's a quality route. So mad props to him on that, and I hope to see him continue. Then I guess chronologically, sort of, since Cameron, you actually did it before, Cameron Hummels, you did it once before and then came afterwards. And to intro you, if I get this right, you have a screen name of Luke Skywalker. I imagine there's a story there. I'll let you jump in. But you are a National Science Foundation postdoc fellow at Caltech. Whew, that's a mouthful. And as simply as I can put it, you conceptualize and code simulation engines for modeling galactic evolution over cosmological timescales. Yeah, that's casual work.
it's standard for ultra runners.
Yeah, the usual, says the gym teacher. And to bring it back to planet Earth, in 2019, you completed a through hike of the PCT going north to south, covering that 2,650 miles in about 4 months. And people can find more information about you at your website, which is chummels.org.
Yes.
Awesome. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for putting it together.
And then jumping down the chronological line of FKT holders, I guess Ashley and I kind of came next. I should intro Jessica Johnson, but was unable to get in touch. But then next in line, we got in, and myself, I seem to be this crazy character who chases FKTs instead of running races. And Ashley's kind of doing the same and quit a career as a vet tech to become a writer and spend more time in the outdoors. And she's been jumping into different guiding positions, has been really enjoying it, and hosts her own podcast called Women of the Wild, women spelled with an X. And that's a cool thing. Maybe Abby, you'll have to get in touch with her on that.
Awesome.
Because that could be a cool opportunity, which brings me to you two, Cordis and Abby. You two are kind of a professional runner, power couple, running for Adidas Terex, and you're based in Boulder, Colorado. You have your own website, abbyandcordis.com, where you spread ideas of veganism and being environmentally responsible and your own adventures together and separately, which I think is awesome. It's totally worth checking out. Again, that's abbyandcordis.com. And if I'm not mistaken, you two just celebrated your first anniversary.
Yeah.
A few days ago, right?
Whoa.
Our website URL was actually our old wedding website that we still own the URL. And we're like, we should just repurpose that into a running thing.
That is awesome.
That is awesome. It's super cute. I checked out your website, and I mean, you guys write very well and great stories.
And Abby's a professional designer, so that's why it looks incredible.
Awesome. Yeah, so Abby, you do design, and then Cordis, you're an engineer.
Yeah, I'm a sales engineer. So technically sales, but also kind of engineering, I guess, too. So.
Awesome. And you both have a bit of FKT experience and racing resumes that are longer than we can really cover here. Yeah, so welcome. It's great. I'm glad you guys could make it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a very flattering intro. I appreciate all the kind words.
So yeah, I guess to jump into the flow of it, now that everybody knows who we are, I don't know, let's just jump into kind of the basics of what drew you to this FKT. Maybe Cameron, you can jump in first since you actually did it before Josh, and he kind of, I don't know, were you guys talking about that? Did he take the idea from you, or was it totally separate?
No, I think, I don't know how he came upon it. I know in retrospect, so I was contacted after he ran it. I was still on the PCT actually, last fall, and I saw, or he contacted me and commented on my Strava thing saying, hey, I ran this route faster than you did. Unless you know of anybody else who ran it faster. In the interim, I think I have the FKT. And I was like, oh, cool. But no, I didn't know a priori that he was going to do it. And I hadn't, initially when I ran it, I really love Death Valley. I think Death Valley is a super awesome park. I mean, it's enormous, and most people just associate it with like Badwater Basin and the Mesquite Sand Dunes, but there's so much more to that park that most people see zero of. And so I really love getting up there because the terrain is so varied, and there's high peaks and there's low desert and such, and just exploring. And so I just looked around and found that was a 3-day backpacking trip. As far as I could tell, I hadn't really seen anybody who'd run it. And I figure a few day backpacking trip is about, you know, what I can handle in terms of a long run. So I scoped that out, and I just went out there a few years ago in March for my birthday and ran it. And I was a little anxious about doing it because, you know, you're pretty way back there, and if you get bit by a snake or something, you're kind of hosed. So I did all kinds of research, and my girlfriend at the time was waiting at the mouth of the thing. She was just kind of walking around and enjoying having a sumptuous meal and reading a book for the day while I was out running it. And but yeah, when I finished, it was really, really hot. So but yeah, I guess the route that Josh chose was basically my route, because I think in part, yeah, I chose that route because I didn't have a 4-wheel drive car. And so I stopped at where I couldn't drive anymore. Mm-hmm. And I guess it makes sense for most of us. I mean, a lot of us don't. In terms of accessibility, it's better to have something that's accessible for a 2-wheel
I've
drive.
started following the same process when there's like a 4-wheel drive access, and if I'm establishing a route that's further up, where you could get in and have a shorter loop, it's like, I'll do the 2-wheel drive to make it accessible, because part of the fun is like having the whole experience and doing more of it on foot anyways. Exactly. And I think that's a great precedent that you and Josh followed there.
Yeah, no, I think it worked out super well. Because if you wanted to just do the loop itself, it cuts off that 2 or so miles in and 2 or so miles out. But I don't know.
And then you don't get a 50K. Right now, it's like a perfect 50K.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's cool how you really feel like you're starting kind of on the edge of the desert floor too. Like you really like enter the canyons at like a very definitive time, which is a cool feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, you get to sleep with that view over the whole Death Valley below you, looking down at Stovepipe.
So cool.
That's pretty sweet.
You have to look at that no campfire sign at the start. Like, yeah, I want a fire right now.
That is true. So during your time out there, any stories that really stand out from your experience? Like, oh, this is a terrible thing that happened, or this went really well, or I got lost here.
Oh, certainly. So the first time, yeah, I was really anxious about water. It was March, and yeah, just as a recommendation to people viewing this, call call the visitor center at Death Valley and see if they have any recent information about how the water's flowing in the spring at Cottonwood Spring. That's the main spring that you can rely on, but I've been told at certain parts of the year it's dry. Although the 2 times I've been out there it's been running, but I've been out there in the late winter. So and in both times I've been there, Dead Horse Spring has been running as well, which I don't think that's very common. I think it's because I've gone on 2 wet years, and I guess you guys have as well. But yeah, so no super disasters. I mean, I think we can all share our experiences about getting lost in the marshland of Cottonwood Springs up at about the halfway point, because it's just so mired in there. It's hard to really figure out a clean route through where you're not just splashing through mud, or you're climbing up on the side of the hillside where it's at like a 60-degree thing and you're trying to figure out how to traverse this without just like falling down into everything. And both times, the second time I ran it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have this, I've got it all figured out now. And no, I mean, I got super mixed up in there. The trails through that section I find are not really clear cut. And if you have a GPS, it helps some, but usually the GPS doesn't provide like a super high resolution view of where your trail is supposed to be. And you look on the ground and there's a couple of use trails going off here and there and crisscrossing. And even this last time, I somehow took a wrong turn. I ended up in marsh and I was like, oh no, I'll just go through this area instead of backtracking to where I had somehow gotten disoriented. And so I just like pushed through, and I'm sure you guys have had this experience, but have you ever been where you're plowing through something, like you're up to waist deep in like marsh grass and you're climbing over trees and you're like, you ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? What is going on here? Why did I make these bad decisions?
How did
So
I
certainly
let
had
myself
some of
make
that.
this decision? Yeah.
We've done that more times than I can count, probably. Like, how did I get here? What am I doing?
I think Cottonwood Canyon is kind of the unexpected, like, oh wait, this just got kind of real.
Yeah.
You're kind of having a bit of fun with everything up until that point, and then it's like you make the slightest wrong call and Cottonwood's like, okay, I'm gonna tear you up now.
Yeah. Yeah,
And you have to go get water there, so like you have to go into the marsh. Like you have to
Well,
be like, I'll just skip the water. But
I ended up, the first time I was totally reliant on that. The second time I skipped water and I was okay.
I skipped water too.
I skipped water as well.
I didn't refill. I
Yeah.
kind of thought of planned on refilling, but I didn't really have I think I had my iodine tablets with me, and I didn't have like any kind of filter. And once I got in there and saw the condition of the spring,
Well, the horses were there, right?
The horses were in it.
That's a cool part of her story.
And
Oh, you saw the horses.
there was like so much horse poop in there that I kind of was like, I think I have enough water. I can get through this, okay? So
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah. It was, yeah. I was like, I don't really want to risk lepto or, leptospirosis or something like that. Like, Giardia or coccidia, like that kind of stuff is handleable, but lepto is pretty bad. So I was like, he's not going to chance it. And it turned out okay. I paid for it a little bit later when I ran out of food and water. Because the horses actually held me up for a while because they were like right where I needed to be. And so like when I was entering the canyon, they were like right at the mouth, like right at the spring. And the stallion was like running around, kind of like he was upset, like he was running around and making all this noise. And so I like veered way around to the left and ended up kind of like sort of cliffed out, and then had to like backtrack and climb down this cliff. And then I'm trying to like crawl through all the cottonwoods and all the growth. And then I'm like backtracking all over the place. And, the horses were there. I couldn't help but stop and stare at them for a while too. So I probably spent at least 20 to 30 minutes just watching the horses.
Oh my god.
And
When you
then,
say left,
yeah,
did you?
I was blown
did you
away.
go
I was like,
clockwise?
What's that?
When you say left, you went to the left. Did you go clockwise or counterclockwise?
counterclockwise.
Okay.
Yeah, we did marble first, Cottonwood at the end.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of important too.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
all like, which way?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I think that was a
all
good.
went same way, did we?
Jason, you were the
Yeah.
first one to do it. When I first did it, the stereotypical way that the backpackers in the past have done it is to do it clockwise. And
Yeah,
so
go
I went
up
clockwise.
Cottonwood, down
Up
marble.
Cottonwood and down Marble. And I did that way, and then Josh did that way. And then I
Yeah.
think we decided to do it the reverse. And then
Actually-
the second time I did it was reverse. And it's much faster. And orienteering wise, it's easier to do it counterclockwise as well.
So Jessica is actually the first one to do it counterclockwise. And
Okay.
then I did it before you did. And I did it counterclockwise because I was worried about that dry fall. I didn't want to get like most of the way through the effort and then encounter that dry fall and go, I can't get around this, and then have to backtrack.
And
So-
I had reached out to Josh and I asked a lot about what the surfaces were like. And from his recollections, he described a lot firmer surfaces
That's right.
in marble and a lot looser surfaces in Cottonwood. And that kind of solidified the decision for me. It's like, okay, based on the profile, I'll have a short bit of walking on the steep climb up out of marble. And then I'll get the payoff of a long, soft downhill run
Cruising out, yeah.
instead of that long grind in deep, sandy, gravelly stuff. And then a shorter downhill.
And
It
you
just seemed to
can't
pay
even,
off for me.
you
I
can't
like the
even
longer.
run that steep stuff coming down into Dead Horse Spring. When you descend that, like, it's too steep to get any kind of speed anyway. So you might as well, if you're going to be slow, be climbing.
Yep.
Yep.
That was my thought behind
Yeah.
the direction I chose. And Abby and Cordis, you both went the same way as well, tackling marble first.
Yeah, and that section, like the connector plateau between the two canyons, running down that is like the coolest thing ever. 'Cause you're
Yeah.
so far away, and when you're going for the FKT and you're just like bombing it, you're like, this is insane. I'm so far from anything. And like, you're just going for it, and you're like, better be water coming up. If you guys all didn't refill that,
I'm really impressed
I
with that
was
too.
definitely out by that point.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, there's like that, definitely that feeling, that committing feeling when you're about halfway through it. And like, I don't know, just I think hearing Ashley about your experience with the horses, like that sounds so intense in like the middle of an experience in Death Valley. Like, I feel like anywhere else in the world that might be like, oh yeah, and then there were some horses, but like everything feels so heightened there. And so like when you're alone out there, it feels like even more just like, I don't know, wild. So I can't quite imagine what that must have been like. Well, I can't
Yeah.
imagine a little
Well,
bit,
and
but
I grew up around horses, and I know how moody domestic horses can be. I was like a little bit nervous because they're large animals, and if the stallion's already worked up and the mares, and there were foals there too, there were baby horses there, and they were like in this circle, like facing outwards, like they were on alert. And I don't know if they were on alert for me or
Huh?
what was
Right.
going on. So I was like, if they charge me, like they
oh yeah.
kill me very easily.
Yeah.
It's just like I have to be really careful working around these horses.
And that's like
Um,
such a remote stretch that it just feels like, okay, yeah, like I would have like best case scenario several hard hours before getting back to like anything.
Yes.
So yeah, you've got to like err way on the side of caution in scenarios like that when you're that in it.
Oh yeah, I wasn't gonna take any chances with the horses at all. And it was like, I mean, I get so excited about things like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, wildlife, like this is so cool. So I was just like totally geeking out too over. I was like nervous and like, you know, a little bit worried about trying to figure out, because that was like right where the route gets difficult.
Right.
And it was just like, it was a lot of emotion kind of. It was like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. It's kind of scary. I don't know what I'm doing. Where am I going? Like, so, but it was a cool experience. And I kind of felt high off of that for the rest of the effort too. It was like, I think the first thing I said when I got back to the finish, Jason was waiting there, and I was like, oh my God, I saw wild horses. It was just like the most exciting part to me. And like, but the views there are incredible. And when I did it, there was a bit of snow.
That's right.
Oh,
Up
interesting.
high, yeah. So I got out of, what was it, Dead Horse Canyon, with that big cottonwood tree, and you go left.
Yep.
And up that big climb that we were talking about, it was all snow. And so there was like a good 3 to 5 inches of snow up
Whoa.
there when I did it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was like
You've had the most.
navigating through snow. There were no footprints. I was like, yeah, it definitely felt very remote and very real once I got out there.
Your comment about like finishing and being like, I saw horses, reminds me like while I was out there, so I come up over like the pass at the high point. I come up over like the pass at the high point and like see a few hikers, and I'm sure all of us have had these moments where like you're just like running with your little pack, and like some people see you and they're like, wait, why are you like, you don't have that much with you and you're very far out here, and you can kind of see it on their face. I come up over the pass and I see these hikers, and like I think I kind of caught them off guard, and I was like, did you see the horses? And they were like, because I didn't see, I like was curious if I was gonna be running into any horses, and they were like, oh yeah, we saw some down the way, and it was just this kind of funny exchange, but I ended up not seeing them.
Oh.
But I think they were kind of like, who is this like kind of like kooky girl asking about the horses and in this little backpack and running and
Out here chasing the horses.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I feel like that makes an interesting part of the experience, since the place you're probably going to see the horses is where the water's flowing. But yet you get this like, I got the same sort of like high feeling as you hit that high point, and then you can look down and see, okay, that's Cottonwood out there when you're doing it in the counterclockwise direction. And so you just know you're just bombing down this loose terrain. And yeah, it's kind of this thing where it's like, I remember while I was running, I'm like, don't let the horses be there. Like, it'd be cool to see them, but don't let them be standing right blocking the way, because I don't know, like I'm pretty committed to going fast and hard right now. It was just this like, but that whole run down until you get into the mouth of Cottonwood is just like a phenomenal experience, where for me, it was kind of like the crux of it mentally, where it's like, okay, I've made it. Like I got through all of the climbing. I didn't blow up. I still feel good. And then Cottonwood taught me a lesson that it's like, no, it's not over yet, buddy. Because it is kind of a rock and a hard place there, because it's like you can either attack on one of the sides where you have these marginal trails and you're side hilling, or you can be down lower kind of crisscrossing and risking it through the bramble. But there's not exactly like a defined, clear, clean line through it.
So I found the clearest route, if you're doing it counterclockwise, if you stay on, there's a little bit of an established trail as you come into the Cottonwood area, and it kind of skirts around to your right and comes around it, and it seems like you're almost going in the wrong direction, and it's kind of on the edge of the hillside, and then it just plunges down. And I prolonged too long not plunging down because I was like, I don't want to go into the marsh. But I think one can oh yeah, here we go. One can avoid the muddiness for quite a while without too much. Yeah, exactly. So that dip, there is the thing that I'm talking about right there.
Yeah.
So swinging wide here instead of charging.
Yes,
this
that's
way.
right.
Because it also seems like it's gonna cliff out at first. Like
It
you
does.
look at that scenario, like what's down below, and it just doesn't feel like it's gonna logically lead you there in a smooth way.
But that seemed to work reasonably well.
This is the point, the high point we're all talking about, where you can look and basically you have an open line of visibility through this whole stretch. And then you've got to remember to swing out wide to your right as you come around this corner going counterclockwise.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that downhill section that we're all saying is awesome, through that connector valley is awesome unless you're going clockwise, and then it is the worst fog because
Oh,
it's
it'd be awful.
Yeah, it would be
it's
terrible.
deep sand and there's horse poop everywhere, and you're just like, ugh, kind of going up. And honestly, when you're going up, it's not entirely obvious which pass you should
Yeah.
take to drop you into Dead Horse. So that's originally I didn't write this up on the FKT site because I was worried about people kind of going off and not really know what they were doing, and then I'd feel responsible if somebody like got lost in the middle of Death Valley or something like that. But if you do the counterclockwise way, I think it's much more obvious the route to take.
I mean, you're the one who's done it both ways, so I would agree from my one-way experience, but it sounds like since you're saying that too, that it's the good
Yeah.
beta.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think there's been more traffic on this in the last. When I did it first, it was in 2017, and I don't think as far as I could tell, nobody ever ran it. And I think there were some backpackers, but it wasn't huge. So there's definitely more tracks than there were. So I think that helps in terms of wayfinding as well.
I actually can't believe how large that that section that we're all talking about looks on the map, because it kind of mentally just felt like it kind of flew by relative to other sections, but it's still a pretty big chunk of.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like the easiest part.
Yeah.
You're just like,
yeah, because you're
plunging
just
in.
cruising down.
Yeah,
the
to
hill.
me, this stretch here was like way longer, where you're kind of doing the steep climb, and then you've got kind of those rollers.
Uh-huh.
But then the moment the top out happened, I mean, I do remember the plants being brutal as I tried to take the cleanest line through here. And I remember just ripping my legs up because I chose to wear shorts. And yeah, those plants did a number to my shins and thighs as I just tried to open it up through this section because I was trying to take the cleanest straight line. And sometimes you have a wide trail to follow, and other times it's like, oh, trail's gone. I do remember being in a lot of pain as I tried to open it up, and the plant would just catch a bit of skin here and a bit of skin there. But it's like, I'm moving fast, just keep going.
Yeah, it is a little unclear through there. You're kind of just like weaving between the kind of sage and just kind of choosing your line. But it is comforting once you've got eyes on that like big willow tree or whatever it is.
Yeah, the spring is pretty obvious, I think. Once you see it, it's like, oh, it's like the forest in Death Valley.
I do think that this route is like a good intro to some wayfinding skills. Like, okay, maybe not like an intro, but like for people who are looking to maybe do things that are more off trail and kind of using cues from the geography, like I think this is like a good confidence builder, maybe is the way of putting it.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Yeah. Especially if you're able to load the GPX device or a GPX file into a device and have that to kind of use to double check yourself.
Not that it's not really hard, but like it feels like conceptually, like, okay, you've got the canyons, you've got the section in between, there's like some good cues to go off of.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah.
The first time I did it, I didn't have a GPX file. So I assembled a map from USGS. So this is, the US Geological Survey has their like, their maps that you can find online. So I printed out a bunch and I taped them together, and then I like overlaid the
Oh, look
route.
at that.
And this was my route. But the thing that was the key for me was at that pass that you have to take, I went onto Google Earth and I plopped myself down on the surface of the ground and looked at what the contours looked like from Google Earth to figure out like what the shape of the pass was. And then like took a picture of that and had it on my phone so that I could identify it. And I even drew a little silhouette of it on here. So it was like, follow this pass.
I love that.
That is awesome.
But, in the end, yeah, this is probably overkill. I just didn't want to get lost in the middle of.
That's so cool though, to see that what you did on paper and using a photo from Google Earth. That's awesome route finding right there.
Yeah, it was fun. Now it's easier with like a Garmin
Yeah.
Fenix to do all that stuff. But.
Yeah.
Almost too easy sometimes.
That's definitely how my brain would think of it too, of like, it's these shapes. Like that's how I love like seeing different people's approaches to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of my big freak out was that dry fall, which the first time I went, it was wet. There was water running down it, which was pretty cool. And I just jumped because I was at the top and I just jumped down and that was fine. But then the second time when I ran it the direction that most of you ran it, which is counterclockwise, I was like, oh, I hope I don't lose too much time on this. I hope I can actually climb it. And in the end, it was fine. Like I did it in 60 seconds or something like that. But yeah, I was freaked out. That was like my main concern.
I actually had a little freak out because when you do it counterclockwise, you encounter this massive chalk stone.
Yeah.
While you're still in marble. While you're still in marble, yeah.
Canyon, this huge chalk stone. It's like what? I don't know, 20 feet. You're like,
Yeah.
This can't be the dry fall.
That's not what they described.
Like, no.
Yeah.
That's exactly the experience I had too. That's so funny.
Yeah, if you encounter the chalk stone while you're still in marble, that's not the dry fall. You need to backtrack, and there's a pretty clear little trail that goes up and around it.
Yeah.
You need to lie back and hand jam it and
Throw up
Roof problem.
a heel hook about halfway through, and then you're gonna have to dyno from the
bad beta. Oh, you go.
I was actually pretty worried about the dry fall going into it too. And when I went, there was water, but it was icy. Everything in those canyons were frozen when I first went through. I actually, after the dry fall, you know how it gets there's a lot of vegetation. After that, there was this area that was a lot of vegetation, like pretty flowers, but the rocks they looked wet, but they were actually icy. And so I was like, kind of running through it and then slipped and like just completely like, you know, sideways, just slammed my shoulder into the ground and got up and was like, oh no, like, am I going to be able to climb again? Like, but I ended up, it was fine. But yeah, that dry fall was kind of icy when I went through it.
Yeah.
It was totally fine. I had numb hands and gloves and went up it without a problem. So.
I'm pretty sure I bypassed it. I don't remember it at all.
Really?
One of the first things I asked you about, and you do a lot of scrambling, so I thought either maybe you just did it kind of subconsciously and didn't think much of it, but I think we zoomed in on a map and realized that maybe you just bypassed it somehow.
Bypassed it because it was like, it's like
the chalk stone. I was just like, oh, okay. Apparently, if there's anything in the canyon that I don't feel like dealing with, I can just go around it. So I think I saw that and I was like, well, I'm not messing with this. Let's go around it.
Because the chalkstone is like 2 or 3 miles before the dry fall.
Yeah, I think you encounter the chalk stone somewhere in here.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the dry fall is going to be out more in this area.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember the dry fall. I mean, if you've got experience in climbing, it's like your mind pretty like solves it almost instantaneously. It's just like a fairly positive, fairly featured up climb. I would imagine someone that doesn't have any background in climbing, it might be like, oh, how do I get up this? But as a lot of backpacking routes do have, someone had found an old dead tree. I mean, which is really impressive in Death Valley, and like laid the tree up it when I was there. So someone who was really desperate could kind of use that to climb up. And who knows if that'll still be there or not. But
I used it because everything was icy. So I was
that tree was there 3 years ago too.
Oh, wow.
I jumped down it, so it's been there for a while.
Interesting.
So when we started that morning, we started separately. So Cordis went 20-30 minutes ahead of me, and whatever, we just wanted to do it separately.
Because we learned that the hard way. The first one we did telescope, we're just like, oh, we'll just get the FKT for her, and it'll be awesome. Then we finished, then it's just and now it has to be mixed team. We're like, okay.
That's right. You guys did Shorty's Well to Telescope. That was one of yours. Yeah. Still
Yeah.
super cool, even though you did it together. Like in my book, it's like that's
Yeah,
still
we still had a great time. But then for this
Yeah.
one, we're just like, all right, just give me a 10-minute head start.
I think we did.
Which I don't know why you gave me the head start, but
Well, because you were just gonna be ahead anyway.
I guess so.
We do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
more fun to chase.
it was funny though, because when I got to the chalk stone, there was like an old man hiking, and he goes like something like, "Oh, your partner's a long way ahead of you," and I was kind of like, "I know, like haha," like, and then he
You
goes,
always get like crap being single one.
yeah. Well, but then he goes, there's a bypass for this, but I thought it was the dry fall, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm good, thanks," and just like kept running into the canyon. And he's like, "What's this girl doing?" And then I come like tail between my legs a minute later, like to go on the chalkstone bypass, and yeah.
That's so funny because I had a really similar experience. There were a couple of hikers coming like towards me, and they were like, "Oh, there's a big wall up there," and I was like, "Oh, it's fine, I got this." And I like go running up to it, and then I looked up and I was like, "Oh no!" And then ended up back.
You need to have the experience of just like running up that canyon, being like, "Oh
Yeah.
crap!"
yeah. If you don't get to have that experience, if you hit the trail perfectly, you don't get to have the chalkstone oh crap experience. Then I don't know if you've really done this FKT.
Right.
No way you're gonna know unless you like are really studying the route and like have the GPX file and you're really looking for it. Because otherwise you're just rolling through the canyon. It's like super cool, and then.
Which I mean, we should take some time to talk about how cool Marble Canyon is.
Yeah.
The rock textures.
Cottonwood is like an underdog in this neighborhood. Cottonwood's also super cool, but it doesn't even compare to Marble.
Yeah, Marble only gets press time, I feel like, for us who are trying to move fast because of how painful it is. But Marble is like, it's that kind of experience where you just want to put your arms out and like touch the sides, and you're just like, wow, this is awesome.
I was like giggling the whole way through. I was just like super happy and like touching the walls and like, doing all those turns, and it's just super fun.
And I think that feeling you're describing of going through canyons like this is what makes the whole route it just feels so like such a natural line. That's like one of the things that's so special about it. It's just so smooth and featured, and you just kind of feel like you're going with the contours of the land.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah. I guess to jump into some more basics, I went and looked up our various Strava distances and gain. And to do a quick read through, there's, as far as distance, there's 30.2, 31.2, 31.4, 31.8, 31.0. And as far as gain, one came out at 4,367, 4,774 was the high number that came out, 4,469, 4,249. So it looks like you're looking at roughly 4,400 in gain and about pretty consistently 31.2, 0.4 miles. And I think where you get some variation there is if when you're on the trails and the roads, if you always just follow the road, or if you follow washes when they take cleaner lines downhill. It was actually my number that came to the 30.2. And I think that my GPS might have read a little short. I don't think I shaved a full mile off, but I was really keen whenever I would see a clean downhill wash line. I would take the wash instead of following the road as it swung wide. So I think that, the really keen FKTer is going to both run it really fast and find those really clean lines where it's like, this is a wash that I take versus this is one where it's better to follow the road.
Not to mention,
go ahead.
Sorry, my GPS had I had some funky data going through Marble Canyon because of how narrow and tall the walls are. So that would definitely make for a lot of variation as well.
Yeah, stuff can bounce around.
Yeah, when I first saw Jason's Strava record, I was like, why is his 2 miles shorter? What is happening? Or, however, a mile shorter. And then I realized, yeah, you had just taken really a really clean line down Cottonwood Canyon, or at least cleaner than I had. But when I reran it, I realized I could have cut it shorter and not gone straight along the road, but it almost seemed like it was going to be slower, at least for me, because being on the hard pack versus being in dusty or rocky stuff, at least I felt like even if I were doing 10 yards farther or whatever, I'd still have a little bit more of a speed benefit. But everybody has different,
Well, at the time I did it, I knew that I didn't have much top end speed beyond like much lower than being in the 7s. So I kind of knew it's like, if there's a shorter line, that means I can happily be between 8s and 9s. That's probably the better line for me. Cause I just didn't have the speed work in place to be like, oh yeah, I'll just drop a 6 on the hard pack.
Right.
I just wasn't in the library at the time.
I was probably in the middle there. If it was like super wide, I would cut it, but didn't shave off a ton. Because like by the end there, and it's getting hot, like your muscles start firing a little bit. If you have to hop over little rocks and whatever plants and shrubbery is in there, you get like some random cramp or something. So then it's nicer to just be able to be in more of like a rhythmic motion on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can almost like tune your mind out and just go.
Yeah. I was really hoping it was not going to get to 30. I was like, this is like one of those 50Ks where it's like a 28. Like, I was really excited. Just like, car's going to be here any second. Going to be done. I was like, nah.
Isn't that how it always goes?
It's a full 31, just like he thought it would be.
Pretty much, yep.
Yeah, how excited was everybody when you got back to the like where the road splits?
Oh yeah, that moment where you like know
Just
you're
like,
there.
Yes.
Like
You're
2
like,
miles
okay,
left. 2
just
miles
that one
left.
canyon.
Yeah, but that last 2 mile section though, that's a real section there.
Well, because even after the spring, there still is like these little kind of like brush sections that kind of build up, and you're like, oh crap, am I like
going?
am I in it again? And yeah, and then there's just that feeling where you're like, oh.
And you hit the road, and you're like, oh wow, we got some ripping to do.
Yeah, those brush sections in the canyon, I actually got on the wrong side of one at one point because it looked like the trail, like it was very obviously people had gone that way, because there was like footprints and everything going off. And so I was like, whoop, took that and ended up on the wrong side of this brush, and then stupidly tried to bushwhack across it to get to the trail on the other side, because I could actually see the trail on the other side. And I was like, oh, I can get over there. And I could not believe how dense that brush was, for one. And then two,
I like how Cameron's just like, no, you're not. No.
This is exactly what I had, where I'm up to like my waist and like climbing through brush. Like, oh my God, I could see the trail. It's 10 meters that way. And you're just like, pulling yourself through.
and there's plants with spines on them that are like 2 inches
It's
long.
so easy to
It's
forget that every desert plant is angry. It wants to hurt you.
Yeah.
They want to hurt you.
Yeah.
And if for a second you forget that, you're like, oh, these are normal plants. I walk through normal plants no, they will take your flesh from you.
Yeah. They like grab onto your skin and don't let go. It's like, I was like, okay. And so I ended up having it after, not being very successful bushwhacking. I then had to backtrack bushwhacking and go back out and around, which took up a lot of time. I was like, well,
Oh.
that's how it goes. Oh, well.
Insult to injury.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
One thing that I do that I think worked out really well for Portis and Abby and I in terms of the timing. I don't know if I hadn't planned it this way, and maybe you guys did, maybe you didn't, maybe it was just done luck on all three of our parts. It had rained the day before we were out there, and I think that rain, well, partially it was detrimental because that meant we had pretty humid conditions the next morning, so it was all steamy, which is not typical for Death Valley, but I think that kind of cemented some of the terrain and the debris a bit more than it would be if it were after a long, really dry period where everything was kind of dusty. This was much more settled and consolidated. So it definitely helped on the climbing portion going up Marble when things were a little bit more solid and you weren't just taking a step and then your foot would collapse out under the loose debris. So I don't know. to future FKT runners of this, it might be worthwhile if you have enough flexibility to be like, oh, there's a rainstorm coming this week. Maybe I'll go out the day after the rainstorm is over, and things might be, you might have a little bit more traction on it. Or I mean,
There's a pro tip right there.
yeah, Josh said, I mean, when you look at what he did it during the snow, which on one account that's definitely more solid, but on the other hand, it's slippery and you don't really know where you're going to go and you might take a misstep. So
Yeah, I was in the snow and ice, and it definitely, the snow was pretty slippery because it was kind of that slushy, like, slick snow, and then the ice on the rocks was really
yeah, I can see where that'd be,
a little rough.
especially with the dry fall.
Yeah.
Oh, decision making.
It made things a little bit spicier, but it was good.
But it must be really beautiful in the snow though, too.
It was, yeah, especially coming up over that high point, and there's that, that sandy area, and then all of those mountains in the background were just completely snow covered. And so, it was a beautiful views. It was really incredible, like seeing all of Death Valley surrounded by snow. Because remember we were there we're looking at the Death Valley crossing. So there's actually a ton of snow there while we were there. But it was just, it made the views really incredible.
Was that on the same trip as your crossing?
We basically took turns as to which of us was doing the foolish thing and which of us was doing the more reasonable thing.
Right.
That is awesome.
For those who don't know, we both attempted the north to south Death Valley crossing, which is a completely unsupported effort where you try to carry enough water to walk 167 miles through Death Valley.
Death Valley.
And it almost always doesn't go well.
You didn't need water at the horse poop spring. You were like, I'm used to this. Like,
I hadn't tried the Death Valley crossing yet. Because I did the Cottonwood Marble Canyon Loop, and then the next day Jason started his attempt on the Death Valley crossing, which is a whole nother story in itself.
Yeah, we could do an hour. We could do more than an hour on that. Holy cow.
For just out of curiosity, for the crossing, I've seen a few different, I've looked at doing a north-south traverse too. Do you start outside the park and come in from the north side of Last Chance Mountain Range and then drop south from there?
You start right at the corner. There's basically these two, I'll call them forest roads for lack of a better term, that intersect, and the corner of the park, the northernmost corner of the park, is right at that intersection. So that's your starting point. You kind of go over, and then you drop down Last Chance Canyon as your entry into the park. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize.
You go by the spring,
feet.
in Last Chance?
I don't remember a spring.
There's a
Of course,
spring
it was covered in snow when I did it.
okay.
There wasn't snow when I did it. There's no spring. Well,
There's one up by a collapsed shack. That's at it's on the way from Last Chance Canyon up to Last Chance Peak. There's a spring there, but when I was there, it was New Year's and it was frozen. There's a big lump of ice on the side of the hillside where the spring was supposed to be.
I mean, there's lots of springs in Death Valley. It's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to trust it, or, there's some pretty nasty water down in there that's coming out. So I don't know. And also with that route, it's kind of like, you try not to detour as much as possible, just because you're just adding more time. And if it's right at the beginning, you're carrying water anyway from the beginning. So.
How much water did you carry?
I started with about 16 liters.
And I started with not enough. I think like 14 liters. I was banking on just being able to move way faster than I was capable of.
Yeah.
And it didn't pan out because my feet got super beat up because of getting wet in the snow. And then the terrain was way rougher. Like in your mind's eye, you think, oh, it's going to be like walking across Badwater Basin. It'll just be really hot. And you do get plenty of that. But before you get any of that, you get really rough rock, and you get, the plants that we mentioned that want to hurt you. And yeah, when my feet got wet and got blistered, it became constant. Every step was just absolutely painful in the pain cave. Every step was a choice to keep going. And And yeah, it turned into a sufferfest, and I just ran out of resources before I could keep going, finish up. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I did it, it was a bit warmer, and I started with more water, and within 2.5 days went through almost 16 liters of water. And I was about 100 miles in, and I was like, I can't keep going. Like, I don't really have a choice. So yeah, it's an incredible amount of water you have to take on those.
Did you rely on any of the natural water sources?
We did research the water sources, and like I said, most of those springs that are there are really brackish. There's a lot of borax, there's a lot of salt, and the freshwater springs are more up in the mountains.
So you'd have to detour
a long ways in order to get to them. And kind of, as far as that route goes, the true ethic of it is to carry all of your water from start to finish. Because there is actually a freshwater spigot, I think, at the Mesquite campground.
Mm-hmm. At all the campgrounds, there's technically spigots that are public access enough that since you could walk up to them any time of year without basically anyone could access them, that under like some other routes that would be considered unsupported still. Like in Switzerland, there's flowing fountains through every town. So it's like, oh, you refill at that, it's still unsupported, not self-supported. But it's specifically written up with this one to be a very strict, act like you're the only human being on planet Earth. Don't use any trails, don't use any roads, like act as if you were the first human being crossing. And so we wanted to do it in that ethic because it makes it this like ticking time bomb of an effort where it's like either you make it before the bomb explodes or you go down in flames, which is pretty unique and pretty terrible. But we've gotten off on a big side tangent here. So to bring it back around, any final stories or advice or beta that anybody had for a future attempter of this route?
I think the biggest thing we've learned from Death Valley, the reasons we've been there in the past is because I've been there for work.
To Vegas for work.
And
we've added
to Vegas
time.
for work. And it is like not that expensive to just rent a car and just huck it out to Death Valley. Like your company will fly you there like a day early. Just like it
like
is
it's
so
more
worth
it's more
it.
accessible, I think is what you're saying, than maybe people think it is. Just given the
Great
it's
advice.
It's so remote, but it's like it's remote, but on the other hand,
But
it's like
if you
not
like
that
this
hard
stuff,
to,
like Death Valley is the coolest place.
totally.
Yeah.
And I know between Josh and myself, we've talked about quite a few more routes that we want to establish in Death Valley, just because it is such a beautiful place with such brutal terrain. So there's definitely going to be more stuff happening there in the future. I guess lightning round. Cameron, since you're the one that did it both ways, clockwise or counterclockwise?
Oh, definitely counterclockwise.
Definitely counterclockwise. I think we all agree there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ashley, rely on the spring or carry all your own resources?
Well, I always start out with enough water, especially if I'm doing a 50K. It's like I can carry 2.5 to 3 liters of water without a problem. So I wouldn't rely on the spring 100% personally, because A, it might not be flowing, and B, it might be full of horse poop. So my personal take.
Cordy, any recommendations as far as like shoe choices or gear choices for this? Pants, no pants, shorts?
I wore pretty little. I wore splits and a tank. I think actually the same tank top.
Yep.
Yeah, and then just go pretty light. I mean, we were there when it was pretty warm, so.
So go light.
Just go light. Yeah, don't bring unnecessary stuff. That's kind of what I was thinking with it.
And we like our filter bottle setup a lot. We've got the
That Catadine Be Free.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's such a great product.
it's so great. And
Yeah.
when you find like certain soft flasks, it'll fit to screw into, and you can just bring one with you and squirt the others. It's a good setup. Yeah.
brought that. I had a broken watch strap at the time, so I had the file on my watch. And so I kept on like having to like dig it out of my pack to like look at the route.
It was like what are those like old time like a pocket watch, you know?
It's like on
Chain,
You had a pocket GPS watch.
Yeah, it was, like terrible.
Did you run with a monocle?
It's in here. And then like
yeah.
Awesome.
Bring
And-
food in your car to wait for you in the car at the end. That's a good pro tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent beta there.
Wells has cookies.
Yeah, you can go and get like $10 gift shop cookies. You'll need like 20 of them. It's not economical.
And Abby, should people make sure that they get gas before they're in Death Valley?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is a great pro tip right there. Yeah.
Was it over $5 a gallon when you guys were there? I know I've seen it pretty well over 5 sometimes. Sometimes it's only in the 4s.
I think we might have been lucky and had it in the 4s, but
The other thing too, it is a 2-wheel drive road to the stop, but it is the most washboarded road of all time.
Yeah.
True.
Like, it's horrible. It's so bad.
Don't take your Porsche up there.
Yeah, it's just like each washboard is like probably a foot deep. It's
Yeah,
just-
you want decent gear. Even if you have 2-wheel drive, make sure your car is not a low rider, or else you're going to be rattling you're going to be rattling your frame regardless. But like, if you just have a sedan, you could probably do it, but you'd want to take those washboards pretty slow or else.
Geo Metro.
Yeah.
He did it in his little red car.
That's my secret, is just have a car that you absolutely don't care if it dies, and then you're great.
walk home across the desert floor.
Well, I guess I'm not running Cottonwood Marble. I'm running back to civilization.
Well, so actually what's kind of crazy about when you did it was you took your little car up there, ran the loop early in the morning, and then had to drive 10 or 11 hours back to Southern Oregon immediately in order to be at work the next day.
That's
Oh man, but those are also
That's bad beta. So whoever's listening, that's bad beta. Don't do that, because trying to get out of your car after that is it's harder than the loop.
on the road on the drive-in. We have an old Tacoma, and I'm the driver for us, and I had Cordis actually holding the gear shift in drive because it was slipping out into like neutral in second. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to hold my manual transmission in the gear I wanted it in, because it would rattle out, and then suddenly I'd be in neutral and like, oh no, losing momentum. Yeah, it's an intense 2-wheel. It's totally doable if you navigate it right. You can do it in a car as long as it's not a low clearance car. I mean, I've seen a Prius up there at the 2-wheel drive trailhead, but you've got to put your tires in the right place. So I'm glad we brought that up. Any final comments?
Death Valley's awesome.
Death Valley is awesome.
Death Valley's
totally
awesome.
worth visiting, whether you're going for the FKT or not. This loop, totally worth doing, whether you're going for the FKT or not.
Yeah, backpack it if you want to. Like, I actually have a friend who's really into backpacking, and she's going to go backpack it this winter. Cool. Because it is a phenomenal loop, no matter how you do it.
It really is.
Or just hit Marble for like a 5-mile hike.
Yeah.
True.
Worst case scenario,
Marble out and
Go
back.
through the Narrows.
Yeah.
Yep.
we'll be happy.
Such a special.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Yeah, this is great.
Thanks for organizing.
Get together.
Appreciate it.
Keep us posted. If anyone's coming up.
Thanks so much for watching this show. I really hope that you found value in the beta and stories that were told here, and that you're inspired to go try this or other routes in the Death Valley area. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And I hope to do more of these on more routes in the future.